So it looks like Trump is suspending payments or sort of the uh, no, funding. That's the word I'm looking for. Funding to Columbia University. It's about, I think, 400 million or so, which I don't think even makes that big of a sort of what Columbia University receives, but basically stops all payments that are going to Columbia University over basically the reasoning being the rising anti-Semitism on camps and the school's failure to address it. Among that, also the probably first, because we'll see more, first a foreign student, specifically, well, actually, we don't know who specifically it is because there are some legal concerns over sort of publishing the names, but basically a first student has their visa revoked over participating, not just participating in a sort of Palestinian protests, but specifically breaking laws while participating. So they're having their visa revoked and most likely will be deported. We'll probably see more information about it soon. There was one story that was sort of going around, I think, when Trump first took office about the Chinese student who had their visa revoked, but I never could confirm the story. I just saw a bunch of people posting it, but no sort of reputable media was talking about it. So I assumed it's wrong, and it probably was wrong or misreported. But now this is officially confirmed that this is someone actually is getting their visa revoked. So this is what we'll be talking about today. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Joining me today is James Valliant. And James, what do you make? So 400 million no longer going basically in federal grants, no longer going to Columbia University. Obviously, it's not going to be a big sort of saving when it comes to the budget, but that shouldn't be really the primary thing we think about. What do you make of this?
Well, that's it. I mean, I don't care how large it is or what it does. Here, it's not an economics thing, although every unnecessary dime of federal spending is a bad thing. It shouldn't go out. But the problem here is that, of course, education is not a proper function of government. It simply is not. There should be, just as we have separation of church and state in the United States, and for the same exact reason, we should have a separation of education and state. These universities do not need the federal subsidies, and we subsidize them in all kinds of ways. We subsidize the students, the customers, by making it easy for them to attend through Pell Grants and loans and so forth. And but we also subsidize many of the things they do. Research grants, all kinds of things, but it should be an across-the-board policy. And so when I heard that Columbia is getting its hundreds of millions of dollars cut off, I thought to myself, okay, that's a good start. Um, but the basic reason is that the government should have no um, strings attached to education at all, because you'll notice that if you have one administration in power, the Biden administration, which is not so pro-Israel, they'll sort of turn a blind eye to what Columbia is doing. Whereas when Trump comes in, that policy difference that from the top is making a difference in terms of the universities, so putting pressure on the universities. The federal government should have no control one way or another over universities. Universities should be private organizations, and they do not need it. Columbia University, for example, has an endowment of $14 billion. And the price that they can charge largely, in effect, because of the federal subsidies. The federal subsidies have actually increased tuition and made university education less affordable for the ordinary American. And so these federal subsidies are counterproductive to Americans being able to afford a good university education. And besides, it is a violation of my rights. You know, when you look at the ideas that come out of these universities, they're pumping out at all of these universities. They're pumping out anti-American little robots precisely because of the monstrous ideas that they teach there. But if they were teaching, let's say, ideas that I liked, it would be wrong as well. Why should someone who is not a believer in those ideas subsidize those ideas? someone is being forced to pay for the ideological propaganda, and whether it's ideas you believe in or ideas that you disagree with. People should not be forced to pay for the education of the transmission of ideas about which they disagree. I happen to disagree strongly with the ideas that you get in the humanities and social sciences departments at American universities. But even if they were all teaching objectivism, it would be wrong to make non-objectivists, to force non-objectivists to pay for objectivist propaganda. And likewise, it's wrong for Americans who really disagree, who support Israel mostly, to have their tax dollars going to support college professors who are basically anti-Israel. So this is a good excuse. I mean, in one sense, I mean, Columbia did drop the ball. They did not enforce there were rights violations of students and just people in the neighborhood that were going on at Columbia University, and Columbia turned a blind eye. And doing that is wrong, morally wrong. And so, in my view, it is a good thing. And but it's the justification for it is a teeny little fraction of the reason, of the broader reason why no university should ever get federal funds. As I say, there should be a separation of education and state for the exact same reason that there's a separation of church and state. These universities do not need it. The price of the education that they charge their students should be a function of market forces, not a function of government subsidies, which it largely is. And these universities, as I say, are plenty rich. They don't need the money. So while I applaud it, I think it's a good thing. I would say it's only a good start, and only for a fraction of the reason it should be happening everywhere, I guess is the way I'd put it. But good. I mean, 3 cheers for cutting off university funding to any university, and double 3 cheers because this was at least the proximate excuse that may start the ball rolling on cutting back educational subsidies from the federal government everywhere, which is what I'm really looking for. Now, as to the student who got their visa revoked, I am a liberal when it comes to immigration. Peaceful, otherwise law-abiding people should be able to migrate to America and come temporarily to America for an education. But when they do violate the law, when they engage in criminal activity, I think it is perfectly appropriate to have them deported. I'm a critic of the visa system because I am such a liberal when it comes to immigration. We should just be open to students who want to come here and study. But when they engage in criminal activities, absolutely, they should be able to be deported. Especially criminal activities that connect them to Hamas. They may actually be getting funding and support from international groups that America recognizes as terrorist organizations and who are a threat to national security. If you're a national security threat and you're engaged in rights violating crimes, if you're engaged in anti-Semitic violence and intimidation on places that and gosh, isn't it especially important that we have freedom, that we have peace on universities so there can actually be a debate. What these thugs do when they come to Columbia University is shut down debate. Recently, what's going on at Barnard College, which is, by the way, associated with Columbia. Columbia University is a very old, one of the oldest universities in America, and it was all male for a long time. And so they set up a female university equivalent associated with Columbia, and that's Barnard College. But that's kind of a relic of the past because, of course, Columbia now allows both men and women entry. But at Barnard College, there was a class that was going to teach both the pros and the cons, of the history of Israel, and just trying to be a neutral, objective history course in modern Israel caused this giant demonstration that directly interfered with the rights of the students at Barnard College. Now, a good school. And why they're still getting funding is beyond me, until and unless Barnard College is. And that's the thing. These universities have sympathy for these protesters. They see it as free speech, not rights violations, not blocking the paths and intimidating the students and disrupting classes. Those are all violations of the rights of the students. And when that happens, the federal funding should go, and the criminal thugs behind these demonstrations, if they are, let me put it this way, recent arrivals to America or here just to get an education, they should be deported. They should be evicted, especially if they're connected in any way to Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran. Iran is actively funding, as I understand it, many of these demonstrations indirectly, maybe not the sole source of their money, but insofar as these people are taking money from Iran or terrorist organizations abroad, they absolutely should be deported. They are national security threats, as well as being criminals who are violating rights. That's I think revokes the friendly invitation to come to America when you engage in violence, intimidation of students at universities where it's particularly important that we have peace, so that a sane civil debate and discussion of ideas can take place.
Yeah, now going back a little bit, talking about the tuition at the colleges and subsidies by default have to increase prices. That's what happens. And even especially if there is an option that it might get forgiven in the future, that's also gonna drive up. This is sort of like evidence, not necessarily from research, but anecdotal evidence. There is one show called Financial Audit, and someone on that show said, I'm not paying my loans because they might get forgiven by Biden. And, imagine just that sort of being in. And, this is anecdotal, but imagine if that is like an actual thing. If you believe that your debt might get removed in the future or something you buy now might get removed in the future, you are going to be more inclined. That's what subsidies are. When government puts a subsidy on something, the argument or sort of the goal is to drive the selling or the of that product, right? So when you put subsidies on loans or federal loans when it comes to universities, the goal is for more people to get those things. When you put subsidies on EV vehicles, the goal is for more people to acquire those vehicles. That's how it works.
You look at the non-subsidized businesses, recently smartphones, computers, and before that, television sets and microwave ovens. The price, you look at the price graph. The prices get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper over time. You look at where does that trend get bucked? In areas where the government subsidizes. And so what it creates with subsidies to health, for example, we still have a insurance-based health system in America. It's not fully socialized, but it's heavily subsidized. And so in effect, there's bottomless demand for healthcare. There's bottomless demand for education. And so those are the areas, education, university education in particular, but education and healthcare is precisely where the costs have gone in the opposite direction as they would normally on a free market. When the prices, costs get cut, prices come down. Not so with education, not so with healthcare. You subsidize it, you have bottomless demand. And what that in effect does is you say, well, we wanted people to get an education. We want people to have healthcare. And it has the exact opposite. They're counterproductive to their own goal. What they do is the prices get higher and higher and higher. And now it's unrealistic for ordinary Americans to afford without some kind of government help, healthcare or education. It actually prices the middle class out of the market. And so it's a tremendously counterproductive policy necessarily. And so again, that's just another reason why all university subsidies, all university supports for their customers should be cut off. No one has a right to a university education. No one has a right to any education at another person's expense. And education cannot but help teach certain values, certain ideas. And those who do not believe in those ideas should not be forced to subsidize ideas with which they disagree. That is just wrong. Morally wrong, and just as wrong as I say, a church-state alliance would be, for the same reason. In this case, specifically for the same reason, because in effect, what you're doing is you're subsidizing a particular ideology, the ideology dominant in American universities today.
Someone was asking in the chat, should government fund research? Because a lot of these grants, even that are going to Colombia, I believe, especially the ones that were cut down, I believe, are the sort of the research stuff. Now, for the most part, I don't think government has any role. Again, this is sometimes it's not even really a question like can something productive be made out of like government subsidies. The number one thing is this is simply not the role of government. It's not the role of government to take money from some people and then give it to some other people in some university to make research about something. Now maybe you could find some case for maybe some specific like weapons or some arms or
Military technology.
some like military technology, maybe
Military
something
technology.
something like the during World War II, the atomic bomb research or something similar to that. Maybe you could make a case for that. Something that has a direct application and that cannot or there is no profit motive in itself. Basically, there is no like if you come up with some space laser that is only sort of has offensive sort of capabilities, there is no like profit making you could make on a free market. Like no one really would want it. It's only that sort of government is in a way the only market. So I think that's the only case where you could somehow like make it make sense.
When you have subsidies for research, you're inviting junk science. You're inviting science that corresponds to policy. And so if you have a research grant and you say, hey, I'm going to explore global warming and the effect on global warming, oh, yes, you're going to get your boom, 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 boom. It doesn't matter how good your science is either. Or we have all these famous cases of, the shrimp on the treadmill, or recently we've heard about the studies to make mice transgender, or something like that. You get a whole bunch of, and in social science and psychology, my God, the junk science. It's an invitation. Government subsidy, again, takes away the market forces that should incentivize and prioritize real science over junk science. When you have government subsidies, it's an open invitation to an abuse of the system. And in areas where you think, okay, no, we need good research. Look, the government hasn't always been involved in research in America. Corporate America and universities were doing all kinds of important path-breaking research before the federal government got involved that had nothing to do with it, and were, by the way, the cutting-edge science in the world. And so you do not need government to intervene when it comes to, say, cancer research. Get the government out of the pharmaceutical business, for example, altogether, with both subsidies and regulations, and suddenly you'll have a free market demand for, hey, we want cancer research. We want a cure for this disease. We want a better way to build a bridge. We want things that'll actually make a difference to people's lives. And so it'll direct a free market is much more suited to directing research money to where it will be more effective and where the people want it, by the way. And so I don't think that the government should be involved in funding research as such. So government research is an invitation to corruption and abuse, and we've seen lots of it. We don't need it. The free market provides all the incentive you need for private companies and universities, which have been the pioneers in so much of America, in the history of America, scientific research. It's really only in my lifetime and in recent decades that the government has been that involved in funding scientific research generally. But of course, the great exception is an area where the government does have a valid function and role: national security and defense. Well, in that regard, the federal government should. Now, I would indicate that also comes with a lot of strings, secrecy and confidentiality. You can't, if you're developing a new kind of defensive shield or strategic missile or hypersonic missile or something, you're going to have to keep that secret. And that's not also conducive to normal science. That's not normal science. Normal science thrives on openness, interaction, communication. And again, government's involvement in that complicates matters enormously when it comes to interacting with private companies. But that is the only case in which I can see government funding scientific or technological research being valid.
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. And yeah, just to finish on sort of this, like even if you can, because some people were bringing some positives of like government research, even if you can find few examples of, government sort of funding of something bringing positive results, which I think would have to happen. I think even when government spends trillions of dollars, there's probably something like positive that comes out at the end of it, but that
People,
fundamentally that is not the role of government. And even yeah,
people
because
will
also on
point
the
out
free market there's going to be junk stuff and there's going to be great stuff, but
when
the
you crowd
cost for those are going to be handled by individuals who want to engage in that, not
when you
forcing
crowd
other individuals.
Yeah, when you crowd out private research, which is what they've basically done in medical research, then all the medical research is being funneled in one way or another through government. And so both the good and the bad will come through that. You can get out of it and you'll have only the good left, it seems to me. So the point is when you're crowding it out, of course you'll have, if all medical research or 90% of medical research is funded by the federal government and they've crowded out private research, in effect, largely, what are you going to have? You're going to have all of the anyone who wants to work in that field, good or bad scientists, but you're going to have a whole bunch of bad along with it if you're going to get that subsidy. A lot of people will say things like wars increase technology. Well, the same scientists and engineers who came up with innovations during war, and doctors, by the way, who came up with innovations during war, or say the space race with the Soviet Union, who came up with all these new technologies, they would have been engineers and scientists regardless. And so what you've done is you've redirected it, is all you've done. You've taken this brilliant scientist away from doing what he might have otherwise done on something else and directed it over here. And if you end up getting Velcro, or Tang, or some medical innovation because of battlefield medical needs or something, what you've done is you've said that this doctor is now having to cure wounds and learning how to cure wounds. What if that doctor, rather than discovering a way of curing some traumatic injury on the battlefield, had been worried about curing cancer? We might have had a cure for cancer at this point. Wars do not increase. Let me give you a couple of key examples. It's the technology before the war that generally sets the agenda for the war itself. So, for example, before World War One, it was the Wright brothers who developed mechanized flight at the turn of the century. And in World War II, warfare comes about. And does it increase certain skills of the engineers in aeronautic engineering? Absolutely, because now they're war machines. But the airplane itself had been invented before World War One. Take the rocket. An American basically in his backyard invented the rocket because he had a dream of going to outer space. And what happens? The Nazis in the next decade developed these horrific rockets that come raining down on London during World War II. And so, yeah, does it press forward something like jet plane technology after World War One? Absolutely, because we're trying to, win a Cold War. But again, you're redirecting that technologist or that scientist into that area who would have otherwise been doing some other scientific or technological innovation. Generally speaking, it's a fallacy to think that war or a space race is what's driving the technology. The desire for technological innovation is already there in a free market, and very often the basic technology precedes the war, which creates the wartime need to subsidize that kind of scientific or technological research, if that makes sense.
Just quickly, someone says SpaceX exists because of grants and subsidies. Also, I think that might be something that government might have a proper role in. Now, I might not mean specifically maybe the International Space Station. I'm not sure if you can make the case for that, but I don't know that much. But when it comes to satellites that are being used for war, and America has the most of them, which are crucial in the sort of modern age. And now, again, I don't know to what extent SpaceX is involved in specifically those things, but even something like Starlink, I think, has military capabilities, just having that access. So I think even if SpaceX is 100% propped up by the government, um, I, I think that is, in many ways, that is something that government would have a role with, even in sort of a more free market. Now, there is no case for NASA, I think. It should still be sort of private companies. I don't think there is any case you can make. I think government should probably not even sort of own the land that government buildings are on. Even that should probably be leased out from private individuals. I'm not sure if you can make even a case for government owning land. So, but yeah, I think even with something like SpaceX, I think you can make a case that there is some proper role when it comes to fund.
I would say some proper role for space technology because it now is part of national defense and military technology. And if and Lord love us, if the government got off the back of private industry, it would be so much richer. It would have the capital to do things like space exploration to the extent that it looked like it might be profitable or even interesting to a curious billionaire. You know what I'm saying? If we didn't have this huge income tax, if 20 some percent of our whole economy wasn't gobbled up by the government, and that's just touching the surface of how it hurts our economy. If we would be far wealthier and would be able to do more pure scientific research, is the example I would think there. There would be people who would just want to do scientific research, whether it's microbes on Earth or exploring space. We would have the wealth, the money to do it if the government would get the hell out of it. Because all government does is destroy the amount of wealth that you could put to it and redirect it towards what the government's preferred research is. So yeah, to the extent that any of them are getting, these private companies are getting government money, I oppose it. As
Uh,
much as space exploration excites me as a human being.
Yeah, but now you have sort of private individuals, just going to see a little bit of space, and at some point you have so much wealth on Earth that it's like, yeah, what's a few billions to spend on just to go on a trip to
Look at
to
how
sort of
these
space?
millionaires who do that get attacked. If William Shatner takes a ride up into space, people say, oh, well, he's just doing it for, that money could be better spent on the poor. Bull. If they want to spend their money doing that, they're not only getting what they want, the slop over effect on the rest of us for their pleasure trip to space. And this is the way it always works. You know, at first, not everyone could afford an automobile, right? Henry Ford creates the mechanized assembly line. Now ordinary people can afford it. The television set. At first, it was only the rich people in the neighborhood who had the television set. But as costs come down, as they're making them for rich people, suddenly more and more and more people have it. And by the mid 1950s, you've got television antennas over every house in America. So it is the pioneering purchases by wealthy people that make high technology available to ordinary people at the end of the day and in short order. So I am all for rich people doing exactly that. Let their own scientific curiosity or their own desire for a luxury good or their own desire for a trip to space help the rest of us and make it at some point affordable for all of us. That's how it works. It's not that people call free market capitalism trickle down. It's not trickle down. It's a flooding down of technological and scientific innovation. And when rich people pioneer some new technology, it is in short order that ordinary people will soon have it available to them precisely because of the rich people who could afford to pioneer it. Income inequality plays a critical role. I'm going to repeat that. Income inequality plays a critical role in the development of an economy, technology and science and so forth. Someone would say, well, geez, if a medical innovation is so expensive that only a rich person can afford it, well, let the rich person pay for the first experiments in it, the pioneering breakthrough. At some point, it'll be available to all of us. And if it weren't for that rich person saying, hey, I want this special treatment, it would never come into being at all. And if you relied on government to do it, it'll be involved in all kinds of government waste, but it'll also be a matter of government's priorities, not the priorities of the consumer.
Um, People in the chat are talking about national parks and if US should do national parks. Something I've seen Trump administration sort of ponder a little bit about is selling government buildings or selling some of the government property. And that seems like a easiest solution and like a really simple solution to a lot of the deficit problems, especially in the West. Most of the land is owned by the federal government. When it comes to like a state like Nevada, I think like 86% is owned by
Alaska.
government. Yeah, and Alaska also. I
But
mean,
even
many
my
of the
state of California,
yeah.
so much of it. Now, and it's also a misdirection to think of national parks, too. Most of the federal land that is owned, large chunks of federal land in the West that are owned by the government, are national forests, national grazing lands, places where they lease, the government leases to mining companies. The government allows ranchers to have their cattle or sheep graze on the land. Timber companies are allowed to forest in national forests. And national parks are a small fraction of all those lands. By the way, just for the record, and it would seem to me that if you privatized a national park, they could, because of the unusual nature of national parks and their natural beauty, that would be the highest demand for the place, for it to be a place of recreation and enjoying the beauty. And they could charge. They do charge, by the way. You just don't get into Yosemite free of charge to see the beautiful Yosemite. And it is one of the most beautiful places, extraordinary places in America. Beautiful place. But they charge you as you when you come in. The admission fee should be sufficient to make sure that that's the highest prized. And let me suggest that on a free market, that would be the highest prized use of that land. So I have no problem with, and that's the practical side. But you see, the practical side merely reflects the deeper point. It is government priorities that, again, are redirecting the use of resources. There's a treasure trove of resources in the American West that are simply off limits to private exploitation because the government owns all that land. America is a poorer place because the government restricts timber and lumber, mining of all kinds of things, grazing lands. The government should get the hell out of being a landlord, the business of being a landlord in the American West altogether. Federal lands should all be privatized in the West, and America would be much richer as a consequence.
Yeah, and even if people want to make a case, take like a national park. Oh, so is there going to be like a giant wall around it so everybody has to go to a toll? When it comes to a lot of these things, and the first thing that comes to mind is the British National Gallery, which does receive government funding and is free as an entry, but most of its income comes from people donations. People just, especially big donators, just giving its money so it can be free for people to go in. So when it comes to sort of free market, you can easily have, some things might be sort of pay for use, that basically if you want to use it, you're going to pay for it. And some might be just some benefactor who wants it, hey, I just want this to be accessible to many people, I'm going to cover all the costs, which is technically the United States is the benefactor right now. Basically says, well, I want people to access it, so I'm gonna take money from all the people and sort of pay for the things
Well,
that have to
you know,
be.
my experience, I grew up in the American West and I've visited most of the national parks in this country, and I love them. I love natural beauty. There's no question about it. But you know, all the roads that approach and go into the national parks have little booths that will get to collect the fee. And but you know, if you're just hiking across, like on the John Muir Trail or something here in California, you just hike right through it. You can't stay. I mean, we're really good in America. We've gotten really good at having rangers go out and take care of trespassers and troublemakers and people who are there to do no good. But that's what it comes down to. And if were private property, believe me, they'd be sharper at it even than they are now.
Someone says, but what protects it, guarantees it protection? What protects you owning your home? Property rights, as in any other case. If and Another case he makes is forests ecosystems aren't a replaceable resource. again, that sort of assumes that humans are some sort of like self-destructive thing, that we see sort of forests going out in the world and it's like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, if we have lack of resource, if we have lack of forest, we can seed some more
It's
forests.
a really funny thing that, there are whole private forests, vast, privately owned, commercially owned forests that do lumber. And what do they do in the meantime? They are keen, even though it may take 50 years for the trees to grow, or 20 years for the trees to grow, or 100 years for the trees to grow. They plant trees because they are looking for profit in the long run. And in the meantime, as the trees grow, what do you do with the land? You rent it out for recreational purposes, for enjoyment purposes. And you're trying, and by the way, uh, giant, you say, well, geez, lumber activity is bad for the, boy, we got way off topic. But you say lumber activity is bad. No, 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 no. There were wildfires that would come through and destroy whole vast forests long before humans got here. The tree population of North America has risen just about every decade for the last 300 years. There are more trees growing in North America today, thanks to human activity, than there were before Europeans came to North America.
Yeah,
So
that is a case that, especially in California, that there might be too many forests, and that you might actually need some more cleaning up, some
the
more sort of
correct
control.
management of it, so that you have goats or something clear out the dead underbrush, because that is all. See, we can't. They say preserve the ecosystem. They're not preserving what was the natural ecosystem, which would have forest fires raging across. We're stamping out fires, and humans are stamping out fires and protecting forests. By the way, fires that naturally occur in the American West, but we're also not clearing out the undergrowth that would come with those natural fires. And so we're creating an extra 10 times worse fire hazard in the process. Yes, but we got way off the Columbia getting out the funds. But
Yeah,
things like this, ladies and gentlemen, if you like something, medical care, education, a beautiful national park, the worst thing to do is put it in the hands of government. Absolutely, the worst policy you could ever do is to put it in the hands of government. That will cause the destruction of the natural beauty faster than private ownership. When something becomes a public commons, it becomes a public urinal, and we ignore the real needs of the even the see what is the thing we want from Yosemite? We want the trees, the wildlife, the natural beauty there. If that really is the highest prized, the highest valued use for it, then absolutely you need it to be on a free market. You need it to be private property. So the more you want something, whether it's healthcare, research, university educations, beautiful national parks, the more urgent it is to privatize it and put it in private hands and get it out of the hands of the government, especially the federal government.
so a few someone in the chat is also saying that basically we do lack old growth forest, which I don't know what that means. But again, if there is something of value, you should be able to convince people to invest in it, in donate it, in basically support it. You do not have a right to force someone else to care for what you care. If
Well,
if some animal is going extinct and people don't care enough to
yeah,
save it,
he,
natural
there's old growth
selection,
forest.
that animal is going extinct. There's nothing we're gonna do.
There's a whole bunch of things you could say about the old growth forest thing. Why? Why do we want old growth forests? To protect the ecosystem for its own sake? Or is there something we get from it? Human beings foster certain life forms and they push back on other life forms. It's as if we haven't turned deserts into green farmlands with our irrigation. It's as though we haven't planted forests and protected forests and have more trees in North America now than existed before 300 years ago. We have more trees today. Now, what do you want? You want to protect a species? Well, if the species is important, if it's something that is of value to humans, humans will value it properly on the free market. But I don't think that the extinction of the species is necessarily a bad thing. 90+% of the species that went extinct without any help from human beings long before human beings arrived on this planet, like dinosaurs. But if something like the dodo bird goes out or the tsetse fly go out, I have no particular desire to see all species. Because it's a bizarre thing, as if nature itself is in this stasis, this delicate, balanced ecosystem. And if you remove one little thing, the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. No. Over time, evolution itself, changing weather conditions, have dramatic changes on the ecosystem. It is not an ongoing permanent stasis. It is constantly evolving new life. It is destroying old life. It is constantly going through change. The idea that humans can't change it is anti-human. It's just an anti-human idea.
Yeah, for example, someone says in the chat spotted owls, which again I don't care for. They don't taste very good. But you know, if there is an actual case to sort of, you know, maybe we need this animal for some research or for something,
Well,
the thing always is that the money that's gonna save it is being paid by someone. And the only question is, are you gonna force other people to pay for that, or are you gonna try to convince people that they should care for this, or an
Well,
institution, or
the spotted owl we've been lied about, by the way. The spotted owl does just fine. In fact, we found that new growth forests are more conducive to the dynamic ecosystem that had been there when fires, naturally caused firefires, would sweep through thousands of kilometers, square kilometers of forest land at a time. So when you don't do that, when you're putting out fires and preserving the ecosystem, you're actually going against what nature was doing before. But it's not preserving nature for its own sake that we're trying to do, is it? If you want the spotted owl to survive, then I suggest you create a spotted owl reserve with private money, private donations, because you value spotted owls for some reason.
Someone says it's not evolution, it is us humans destroying it, not knowing how we impact nature. That is the anti-intellectual view of humanity, that we don't know what we're doing. We cannot know what we're doing. No, we are smart, we are rational, and we have an ability to sort of research and study the world and find out more about it and study the consequences of our actions. And if there are things that we want to do, we can do them. But
If you
we
want
need
to
to.
protect physical harm, people from being physically harmed, make it private property. That's the only way. If human well-being is your standard, if it's nature for its own sake, then, you know, we have, like I say, humans come along and we're destroying nature. No, humans preserve and have kept alive, have preserved certain species of flowers and trees. And if it weren't for humans, certain species of animals would not. See, we encourage certain life forms and we discourage other life forms. And that's okay. That's good. What is the value of nature in itself? That's what I would ask you to consider. Is nature, non-human nature, however it evolves and gets dynamic, is what you want? That I don't understand what your value is. Nature by itself can wipe out whole species. Wipe out whole species. Climate change, natural occurring climate change. You know, we didn't cause the last ice age. Naturally occurring climate change can wipe out whole areas of. And now, if you think, well, humans coming in, with invasive species in Australia or invasive species in Hawaii, we've changed the ecosystem or something. Wait, what are you arguing for? Are you arguing for pristine nature, clean from the pollution of humanity? Well, there I have a radically different set of values. Life should be, in effect, we should be encouraging and discouraging biology based on our values and our needs. And as Daniel points out, to the extent that we are aware of it, we've actually improved nature. We've turned deserts through irrigation in my country into vast areas where life grows and plants grow.
Yeah, I'll just read out a few comments and then we can continue. Someone says, we can, but we just can't pretend we always understand all the variables. Someone says, you're a lawyer and teen playing computer games for a living, for fuck's sake. And also says, nature has its own value. You don't get to decide. Again, but you get to decide with the force of government what is the right thing for us. Again, if there is a case for anything you want, you should be able to persuade people to do so, because the only other option than persuasion is the government force, is by forcing people to care for something.
You know,
If you
we have these wild animal parks in America where we've gone from zoos because we didn't like zoos because that cages up the animals. And so we have these wild animal parks where they'll take you through on a tram or you can drive through yourself, large areas. And those areas are places where, your wildlife is better protected than in the wild, than in the wild. And you know, I don't have a lot of examples of humans screwing up nature that turns out to be benevolent for humans. But I do have a lot of examples of, for example, it's your poaching laws on elephants that are wiping out the elephant population in Africa, for example, because people are still going to be poaching for the ivory. And if people could herd them like private companies could herd them to get as old an elephant as possible for the biggest ivory tusk as possible and collect that for commercial purposes, you'd have someone with a financial interest in preserving elephants. And so it is just simply for the recreational and aesthetic purposes, our natural preserves in America are the best places to be a wild animal. You're going to be protected. You're going to be make sure that they have an environment that's friendly to you and doesn't wipe you out to extinction. And it's only because of human interest that sometimes keeps these animals alive. Whereas the environmental protection of elephants is killing the elephants.
Yeah, again, we are here not arguing, let's burn all the forests, let's destroy all of nature. Let's let the individuals decide, and let's actually enforce individual rights. Let's give the property is can only be held by individuals. There is no such thing as public property. It's an oxymoron.
Well, there should not
It has
be,
to be.
or at least there should be only, if there is any government property, in quotes, it should be restrained to the very, very basic needs of law enforcement, military, courts, things of that nature. And most of it should be privatized, sold off, much to the benefit of the American taxpayer. Look, as I say, you can look at a graph of the trees in North America, and for almost every decade over the last 300 years, the total tree population has increased. And that's thanks to humans. Thanks to humans, we have bigger and more forests.
And yeah, again, if the argument is that humans left to their own devices will like destroy themselves, then humanity is doomed either way. You either believe in rationality and reason of humans and capability of individuals to be able to sort of deal with nature, or you don't. And if you don't, then there is nothing that can, no amount, no government mandate, no sort of enforcing, no ruler that could benevolently sort of order us what to do. Nothing can save us if we are going to
This whole
destroy
nature
ourselves.
for its own sake is just a religious idea. It's a dogma. Nature is constantly changing. Species are coming into existence and out of existence when you back up and look over time. There's no such thing as a pristine, preserved ecosystem that lasts forever. No, 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 no. It's constantly changing with or without us. But we should be our own highest value. I am human centric, if that's the way you want to look at it. And anything else is sheer religion. What? God's creation needs to be preserved? It's a Garden of Eden in itself? No, it's a totally religious idea, totally mystically based. Nature for its own sake, or the globe is a living organism. It's a bizarre, anti scientific claptrap.
We have a super chat from Gail, thank you so much, and a super chat from Brian, thank you so much. So people still are arguing that, for example, private industry has never worked for paying for or acting in the public interest. If that's your view, I'd look at the history again. But here I can only recommend reading some of Ayn Rand. I think this is more fundamental than sort of what me and James are gonna convince someone in
You want to go back in a
half an
time
hour.
machine for private industry. Help yourself. You'll have a lower life expectancy. Your babies will die. Your mothers will die during pregnancy. People will be on the verge of starvation and subject to famine and plague and so forth. No, technology and industry is what has actually the only damn thing that has helped humanity. The only thing that has helped the poor is free market capitalism. The only system that has ever done a damn thing to help the condition of the poor. That's not my, by the way, my ultimate moral justification for it. But if you just look at the facts, ladies and gentlemen, it is the private industry, the exploitation of nature, which has been the best thing to ever happen in the history of human beings on this planet.
Um, So, okay, I'll just finish with this. Someone in the chat says, I want us to protect nature and diversity. Yes, anywhere, but in this chat that is not controversial. No, you want everybody to protect what you think is important and force people into doing so because you don't think, because either you think people are too stupid to understand your arguments, or you despise other people and think they do not care for. If there is a genuine case for something, you should be able to convince someone. The reason why you want government to do it is because you don't believe that is something you could convince someone in
Yeah.
doing.
Put your
And
guns down. Put your guns down. Your government guns down. Okay? Forcing people, pushing people around like that is always wrong. And forcing human beings is a much greater concern to me because I've seen how humans interact with living organisms. We won't destroy ourselves by destroying the environment. We don't do that. That's why we have all kinds of technologies, in fact, fertilizers and topsoil protection and dams and irrigation and planting of forests. Look at actual human history in the free market, and you'll see that humans are not hostile to other life forms, but we definitely encourage some, discourage others based on our values. Put your guns down, and you'll have a nature that's friendly to humans and a lush nature. If you want, because we have to, there are certain life forms that we really need to continue our well-being and life for. To think that we'd be put the gun to our own head and bang by voluntary consent is thinking that humans are just suicidal monsters. But as I say, we have bigger forests today thanks to humans.
so we'll probably have to rename this episode, but with that, I'd only recommend people reading Ayn Rand's Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, because I think this one makes the most sense right here. And the fact that people still do not understand what capitalism really is and still think that if there is something good that should be done, then a government should force people to do so.
Yeah.
And
And this religion of nature is just religion, is just dogma. You go on an island someplace, buy your island, and get eat up by tsetse flies and saber-toothed tigers if you want, because I guess Homo sapiens may have played a role in the elimination of the saber-toothed tiger. I'd say that's a good thing. But go live at one with. You ever seen that show, Naked and Afraid, where people go out into a hostile environment, all natural environment, and they're set out naked in effect, and they have 3 weeks to get to an exit point. You can see they all lose weight. Some of them have to be extracted because they can't physically survive the ordeal. If you want to go be at one with nature and suffer like that, you and your children go do that. Don't make me and my children do that. Thank you very much.
we have a super chat from Bronx Guy Can Hill RD. Thank you so much for a super chat. And with that, someone asked if we even talked about the original topic. We did for first like 15 or 20 minutes or
First
so.
15 minutes, maybe.
No, even a bit longer because then we
Okay.
talked about the education also. I mean, generally we agree with the steps Trump has taken. Generally,
Good.
it should be more of a broad policy of we do not fund education and we do not technically there shouldn't be any visas to be revoked, but if someone does break a law and they are not citizens of the United States, normally if someone breaks the law you put them in jail. If they are someone who are not sort of residents or citizens of the country, I think you can easily make the case for deportation. So
Yes. Ayn Rand's essays, Man's Rights and the Nature of Government, I would highly recommend because you'd see there what the proper function of government is and why government should not, and capitalism and ideal, which addresses things like education and medical care, So what I urge people to consider is what the proper role of government is, and it sure the hell ain't in using forced tax dollars to fund education and the propaganda of ideas they may or may not agree with. That is morally wrong.
And those two essays, I believe, are In the Virtue of Selfishness.
And
Oh,
capitalism, the unknown
okay.
ideal.
So people have a lot to read. Tomorrow we'll be back with another episode of the Daily Objective. Until then, thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye bye.
Bye bye.